I came home early to surprise my husband with a home-cooked dinner, only to overhear him telling his mother that he regrets marrying someone so boring and secretly wants out of our marriage, leaving me completely shattered and questioning everything. As a marketing manager for a mid-sized company, my days are typically quite extended. However, yesterday, I finished my client presentations early and decided to surprise my husband, David, with his favorite homemade lasagna. We've both been so busy lately, and quality time together has been scarce. We've been married for 3 years, and I know he's been stressed about his job at the accounting firm. So I thought a nice dinner and a quiet evening might be exactly what we both needed. On my way home, I stopped at the grocery store, picking up all the ingredients, along with a bottle of his preferred wine. I felt genuinely excited, picturing his surprise when he walked into the aroma of his favorite meal cooking. Perhaps we could just relax and talk, like we used to when we were dating. I arrived home around 4 p.m., much earlier than my usual 6 or 7 p.m. finish. David's car was already in the driveway, which was unusual since he typically works until at least 5:30. As I pulled up, I noticed the living room lights were on. I figured maybe he was sick or had left work early for some reason, but as I was taking the groceries out of my car, I heard voices from inside the house. I recognized David's voice, along with what sounded like his mother, Linda. This struck me as odd, as Linda usually calls before visiting and lives about an hour away, so casual drop-ins weren't her style. Juggling grocery bags and fumbling for my keys, I heard David's voice grow louder. He sounded frustrated or upset about something, so I slowed down, not wanting to interrupt a serious conversation. That's when I heard something that sent a chill down my spine. I just don't know how much longer I can keep pretending, Mom. She's so boring and predictable, and I feel like I'm dying inside every day I come home to her. I dropped one of the grocery bags and froze. There was no way he was talking about me, right? But then Linda responded, "Well, honey, you've only been married 3 years. It's not too late to start over if you're really that unhappy." And David replied, "I know, but it's complicated. We have the house, and all our finances are tied together, and everyone expects us to be this perfect couple. But I just feel trapped. She comes home every night and wants to talk about her day and watch Netflix, and I just sit there thinking about how this is going to be my life forever." I felt nauseous. This was definitely about me. I couldn't understand where this was coming from. I thought we were happy, or at least content. Sure, maybe we'd settled into a routine, but that's what married couples do, right? You build a life together and find your rhythm. Linda then said, "David, you can't stay in a marriage just because it's convenient, or because people expect it. You're still young. You could find someone who actually excites you and makes you want to come home every day." David sighed heavily and said, "I know, you're right. It's just that she tries so hard to be a good wife, and she really loves me, and I feel guilty for not feeling the same way anymore. Like yesterday, she texted me about wanting to plan a weekend getaway, and all I could think was how I'd rather go alone or with literally anyone else. That hit me hard. I had texted him about that bed and breakfast we'd discussed months ago, and he had seemed enthusiastic. Apparently, he was just pretending. I stood there, groceries scattered around, my feet trying to process that my husband had been deceiving me about fundamental things, like wanting to spend time together. Linda continued, "Guilt isn't a good enough reason to stay married, David. You're both still young enough to find real happiness with other people, but every year you wait, it's going to get harder." "I know," David said. "And honestly, there's this woman at work, Rebecca, who I've been talking to more and more. She's everything my wife isn't. She's spontaneous and funny. And when I'm with her, I remember what it feels like to actually want to be around someone. I had to grab onto my car because I felt dizzy and sick." Now he was talking about another woman, and suddenly, everything made sense. Why he'd been working late more often, why he'd been distant during our conversations, why he'd seemed less interested in physical intimacy lately. He wasn't just unhappy with our marriage. He was already emotionally involved with someone else. Linda asked, "Have you and Rebecca crossed any lines?" David paused for a long time before saying, "Not physically, but emotionally, yeah, definitely. We text all day, and we've had lunch together several times, and I've told her things about my marriage that I probably shouldn't have. She knows I'm unhappy, and she's made it pretty clear that she's interested in more than friendship. Well then, Linda said, it sounds like you already know what you want to do. The question is, when are you going to be honest with your wife, instead of stringing her along? David replied. I've been thinking about it constantly, but I keep chickening out because she's going to be devastated, and her whole identity is wrapped up in being a wife and building this perfect little life together. She talks about kids and retirement and growing old together, and I just smile and nod, but inside I'm screaming because I can't imagine anything worse than being stuck in this boring, predictable life forever. I realized I was crying and tried to wipe my face, but my hands were shaking so badly I could barely function. This was my husband talking about our marriage like it was a prison sentence, and describing me like I was some pathetic woman whose only purpose was being a wife, when I have a successful career and friends and hobbies outside of our relationship. Linda said, David, you can't keep living a lie. It's not fair to either of you. She deserves to be with someone who appreciates her, and you deserve to be with someone who makes you happy. I know, he said. Rebecca and I have been talking about what it would be like if we were together, and it's everything I wish I had. She wants to travel and try new restaurants, and she's not obsessed with creating some perfect domestic life. She actually has opinions about things and challenges me instead of just agreeing with everything I say. The way he was describing this Rebecca woman made it sound like I was some boring housewife with no personality, when that's not who I am at all. I love trying new things, and I have plenty of opinions. I just don't pick fights over every little thing because I thought we were a team working toward common goals. So, when are you going to tell her? Linda asked. David sighed again and said, soon, I think. Maybe after the holidays because I don't want to ruin Christmas for her family, but definitely before our anniversary next year because I can't pretend to celebrate another year of a marriage I want out of. Linda responded, that's probably smart to wait until after the holidays, but, David, don't wait too long, because the longer you put it off, the harder it's going to be and the more attached she's going to get to this life you've built together. Yeah, David said, and honestly, Rebecca is starting to get impatient because she wants to make this official, and I don't blame her. She's amazing, and I don't want to lose her because I'm too much of a coward to end a marriage that's been over for months anyway. I couldn't listen anymore. I quietly gathered up the groceries that had fallen and got back in my car. I sat there for probably 10 minutes, just trying to process what I'd heard, before I finally started the engine and drove to my sister's house, because I needed someone to tell me I wasn't losing my mind. When I got to Sarah's place, I was crying, so hard I could barely talk. She took one look at me and knew something terrible had happened. I told her everything I'd heard, and she was furious. She kept saying she never liked David anyway, and that she'd always thought he was fake and condescending, but hadn't wanted to say anything because I seemed happy. What are you going to do? She asked, and I realized I had no idea. My entire adult life had been built around this marriage and this man who apparently saw me as boring and predictable and had been planning his escape for months while lying to my face every single day. Sarah said, you need to confront him tonight before this goes any further. But I told her I needed time to think because I was so shocked and hurt. I didn't trust myself to have a rational conversation, and I definitely didn't want to give him the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart when he's probably been hoping I'd make it easy for him by being the one to bring up divorce. I stayed at Sarah's for a few hours and then went home around 8 p.m. I found David in the kitchen, making himself dinner. He looked up when I walked in and smiled like nothing had happened, asking how my day was and if I wanted to order takeout for dinner. I just looked at him and said, I had an interesting day. How was yours? And he replied, oh, same old boring stuff at the office, nothing exciting. And I wanted to scream because he was lying right to my face after spending the afternoon planning his exit strategy with his mother and talking about another woman he's clearly having an emotional affair with. I said, did you do anything else today besides work? He hesitated for just a second before saying, no, just came straight home. Why? So I said, that's funny, because your car was here when I came by earlier to surprise you. But you didn't answer the door, so I figured you were in the shower or something. His face went completely white, and he stammered something about maybe taking a quick nap and not hearing the doorbell, but I could tell he was panicking because he realized I might have overheard something. I said, well, I'm pretty tired, so I think I'm going to go to bed early." He looked relieved and said that was fine. He was probably going to watch TV for a while anyway. I went upstairs and lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how this man I've loved and trusted for over 5 years has been living a complete lie and planning to abandon our marriage while making me think everything was fine. The worst part is that he's probably been sharing intimate details about our relationship with this Rebecca person and painting me as some clingy, boring wife when I've been working my butt off to build a life with someone who apparently checked out months ago. I keep thinking about all the times recently when I've tried to plan things for us or suggested date nights, and he seemed unenthusiastic. And now I know it's because he's been comparing everything to what he could be doing with her instead. Every conversation we've had about our future has been meaningless to him because he's already decided he wants a different future with someone else. The thing that really gets me is that he's planning to wait until after the holidays to tell me, which means he's going to sit through Christmas dinner with my family and smile and play the loving husband role while secretly counting down the days until he can dump me and run off with his work girlfriend. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I know I can't keep pretending everything is normal when my husband thinks I'm boring and predictable and has been emotionally cheating on me with someone he's already planning a life with. Update 1. Taking the reins. I couldn't sleep all night. That conversation kept replaying in my head. This morning, when David left for work, he kissed me goodbye and told me he loved me, like he does every morning. But now I know it's all an act. And he's probably going straight to work to text Rebecca about how he can't wait to be free of his boring wife. I called in sick to work because there was no way I could concentrate on client presentations when my entire life just got turned upside down, and I needed to figure out my next move. I spent most of the morning crying, and then I got angry. How dare he make me feel like there's something wrong with me for wanting a stable, loving marriage, when that's what we both said we wanted when we got married. Around noon, I decided to do something I've never done before and drove to David's office building because I needed to see this Rebecca person for myself and understand what I'm apparently competing with. I sat in the parking garage for about an hour, feeling like a crazy person. But then I saw David walking toward the elevator with a woman I didn't recognize. They were laughing about something, and he had his hand on her lower back in a way that was definitely not professional. She was everything I'm not. Tall and blonde, with perfect makeup and wearing a tight dress that probably cost more than I spend on clothes in 6 months. She looked like the kind of woman who's never had a boring day in her life, and suddenly I understood why David feels trapped in our quiet domestic routine when he could be with someone who looks like she stepped out of a magazine. I watched them get on the elevator together, and David was smiling at her in a way I haven't seen him smile at me in months. I realized this isn't just an emotional affair anymore. You don't touch someone like that or look at them like that unless things have already gotten physical. I drove home feeling numb, and that's when I decided I wasn't going to wait for David to work up the courage to leave me. If he wants out, then I'm going to make it easy for him. But I'm not going to let him control the timeline or the narrative. I called a divorce lawyer and made an appointment for tomorrow morning because I'm not going to sit around waiting for him to dump me after the holidays like I'm some pathetic wife who doesn't deserve honesty or respect. I also called my boss and told her I needed to take a few personal days to deal with a family emergency, which isn't really a lie, because my marriage falling apart definitely qualifies as an emergency. The hardest part was calling my parents and telling them what was happening, because they love David and always talk about what a good husband he is and how lucky I am to have found someone so stable and reliable. My mom started crying and kept asking if I was sure and if maybe I'd misunderstood what I heard. But I told her there was no misunderstanding. David clearly said he regrets marrying me and is already involved with someone else. My dad was quiet for a long time, and then he said, "Honey, I'm sorry you're going through this, but if that's how he really feels, then you're better off finding out now before you waste any more years with someone who doesn't appreciate what he has." When David came home tonight, he was in a good mood, which probably means he had a nice day with Rebecca planning their future together while I was having the worst day of my life. He asked what I did today since I wasn't at work, and I told him I wasn't feeling well and spent the day resting. He said, "Well, hopefully you'll feel better tomorrow, because I was thinking maybe we could try that new restaurant downtown this weekend." And I just looked at him and thought about how he told his mother yesterday that the idea of going anywhere with me made him miserable. But here he is still pretending to want to spend time with me. I said, "Actually, I think I'm going to be busy this weekend." He looked surprised and asked what I was doing, and I said, "Just some things I need to take care of." He didn't push it, but I could tell he was confused because I never have mysterious plans that I don't want to share with him. I'm meeting with the lawyer in the morning, and then I'm going to come home and tell David exactly what I heard and that I know about Rebecca, and that he doesn't have to wait until after the holidays to start his new life, because I'm done pretending everything is fine when my husband thinks I'm boring and has already moved on emotionally. Update 2. Confrontation and control. The meeting with the lawyer went better than I expected. She said that since we don't have kids and most of our assets are pretty straightforward, it should be a relatively simple process, especially if David doesn't want to fight it, which he probably won't since he wants out anyway. She also said that while emotional affairs aren't necessarily grounds for anything legally, they do show a pattern of dishonesty that could be relevant if he tries to claim he deserves more than half of our shared assets. I told her about the house and our savings and retirement accounts, and she said I should start gathering financial documents before David realizes what's happening. I went home and spent the afternoon copying bank statements and investment records, making sure I had everything I needed to protect myself financially. It felt weird going through our paperwork, knowing that soon it would all be divided up and we'd be living separate lives. But it also felt empowering to take control of the situation instead of waiting for David to decide my fate. When David got home, he seemed distracted and kept checking his phone, which I assume means Rebecca was texting him about their secret relationship. He barely ate dinner and kept saying he had some work to catch up on, but I saw him smiling at his phone in a way that definitely wasn't work-related. After dinner, I said, "David, we need to talk." He looked up from his phone with this guilty expression and said, "About what?" I took a deep breath and said, "Yesterday, when I came home early, I heard your conversation with your mother about how you regret marrying me and want out of our marriage." His face went completely white, and he started stammering about how I must have misunderstood and that he was just venting about work stress. But I cut him off. "I also heard you talking about Rebecca, how you've been having an emotional affair with her, and that you've already planned your whole future together." David put his head in his hands and was quiet for a long time before he finally looked up and said, "I never meant for you to find out like this." "So it's true?" I then asked. "You really do think I'm boring and you really have been lying to me about wanting to work on our marriage while secretly planning to leave me for your co-worker?" He tried to explain that it wasn't that simple and that he did care about me, but that he'd fallen out of love and didn't know how to tell me without hurting me. But I told him that lying to me for months and making me think I was crazy for sensing that something was wrong was way more hurtful than just being honest would have been. "When did this start with Rebecca?" I asked. David hesitated and then said, "We started getting close a few months ago, just as friends, but it developed into something more, and I realized that what I felt for her was what I thought love was supposed to feel like." "And you didn't think I deserved to know that my husband had fallen for someone else?" I asked. He said, "I was trying to figure out how to handle it without destroying your life." "Well, congratulations, David. You've destroyed it anyway. But at least now I don't have to waste any more time trying to save a marriage you checked out of months ago." He started crying and saying that he never wanted to hurt me and that he knew I was a good person who deserved better. But I told him that if he really thought I deserved better, then he would have been honest with me instead of making me feel like I was imagining problems in our marriage. "So what happens now?" he asked. I told him I'd already filed for divorce and that he could move out whenever he wanted to start his new life with Rebecca, because I wasn't going to fight for someone who didn't want to be with me. He looked shocked that I'd already taken action and kept saying he thought we could talk through it and maybe try counseling, but I told him there was no point in counseling when he'd already decided he wanted to be with someone else. "I'll start looking for a place this weekend," he said. "Good," I replied. "And David, next time you want to end a marriage, maybe try being honest instead of lying to someone's face for months while you plan your exit strategy behind their back." He tried to apologize again, but I told him I was done talking and went upstairs to our bedroom. That would soon just be my bedroom. For the first time in months, I felt like I could finally breathe. Update 3. Moving forward. It's been 2 weeks since I confronted David, and he moved out last weekend to a furnished apartment across town. The house feels empty, but also peaceful, without the constant tension of living with someone who was pretending to love me while planning to leave. The divorce paperwork is moving along smoothly, and David hasn't tried to fight anything, which confirms that he really did want out and was just too much of a coward to be the one to initiate it. He came by yesterday to get more of his things, and he looked guilty and kept trying to make small talk, but I just stayed upstairs until he was done. I found out through a mutual friend that David and Rebecca are already officially together and posting pictures on social media like they're some perfect couple, which is pretty disgusting considering he was married to me less than a month ago. But I guess when you've been planning something for months, it's easy to move on quickly. The weird part is that I'm not as devastated as I thought I'd be. Yes, it hurts to know that someone I loved was capable of such deception, but I'm also relieved to be free of a relationship where I was constantly trying to figure out why something felt off, without realizing my husband had already emotionally left the marriage. My friends have been amazing, and several of them have admitted they never really liked David but didn't want to say anything because I seemed happy. My sister Sarah said she always thought he was fake, and that she could tell he thought he was better than everyone around him, which honestly makes me feel better, because it means the problem was never me being boring. It was him being a selfish person who wanted something different but was too dishonest to admit it. I've started seeing a therapist to work through the betrayal, and she's helped me understand that David's characterization of me as boring and predictable was really just him projecting his own dissatisfaction with his life choices onto me. She said that people who cheat emotionally often rewrite history to make their spouse seem inadequate so they can justify their behavior to themselves. Work has been a good distraction, and my boss actually offered me a promotion that would involve traveling more and working with bigger clients, which is ironic because David always complained that I was too focused on my career, but now that focus is paying off in ways that will benefit my new single life. I'm also rediscovering parts of myself that I'd maybe lost during the marriage. Not because David was controlling, but because I'd focused so much energy on being a good wife that I'd stopped prioritizing my own interests and friendships. I've started taking a pottery class and signed up for a hiking group, and it turns out I'm not boring at all when I'm not trying to accommodate someone who secretly resented everything about our life together. The funniest part is that yesterday I ran into Linda at the grocery store, and she had the nerve to try to apologize and say she never meant for things to happen the way they did. I told her that she was David's mother, and it was her job to support him, but that she should have encouraged him to be honest with me instead of helping him plan his deception. She said she thought he would eventually work up the courage to tell me himself, and I said, well, he might have if you hadn't been enabling his cowardice and helping him justify treating me like I was the problem, when really he just wanted to chase after someone who made him feel young and exciting again. She looked hurt, but I don't really care because she played a role in making one of the worst periods of my life even longer by encouraging David to wait until after the holidays to devastate me. I know I'm going to be fine, because I'm the same person I was before David decided I was boring, and I'm realizing that someone who truly loved me would have seen my stability and loyalty as strengths, not weaknesses. Rebecca can have him, with his wandering eye and his tendency to blame other people for his own unhappiness, because those qualities that attracted him to her will eventually make him dissatisfied with her too. The divorce should be final in another month, and then I can close this chapter completely and start building a life based on what I actually want instead of what I thought would make someone else happy. Sometimes the most devastating truths really are spoken when they think you can't hear them, but sometimes overhearing those truths is exactly what you need to stop wasting your life on someone who doesn't deserve it.